and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about strengthening your family. Alvean Lyons, our guest from Healthy Families, has some tips for us about how we can do that. Welcome.
Thank you, Robin.
Oh. This is like parenting in a nutshell. You're going to give it to us all right here, but we can always get more if we actually take the classes.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's important that people know what's inside of them because people don't always know. I mean, when you've got limited time,
right,
we want to use our time well. And we don't know what we're signing up for. What are we going to get out of this? So the reality is there's some great things that we're going to be able to learn. So we'll talk about those, but know that you really get to have a very comprehensive experience if you actually sign up.
Absolutely. What you're learning. So.
And specifically with your teenagers, because strengthening families is for 13 to 17-year-olds. So as in parents of those children. And you get to bring your kids and they get to do some work separately and you get to do some work separately, and then they bring you together and you get to apply that. I mean, it's really fantastic. So if you're going to spend time doing anything growing as a family, strengthening families is a great opportunity to be able to do that. So, okay, so it is fair to say that every one of us cares about the condition of our families.
Yes.
Quite frankly, it has a lot to do with our sense of fulfillment and happiness as adults. What's going on inside of my family? So we're going to use CARE as an acronym. I know you're just oh so surprised that she has yet
have
another.
An acronym. It helps us remember things, you know that.
Exactly. So let's use that. So let's start first with the C, communication. A lot of times we talk about communication and we always think about it in terms of the talking part.
I'm good at that. I can talk.
Hey, you and me both. But listening, that's a whole nother skill.
And even talking about the hard things and how you're feeling about them, that's harder too. I can talk.
Oh, true.
I can tell my kids what they need to do, but the listening and the talking through things.
It's challenging. It's challenging.
Yeah.
And particularly those teenage years. You know, you have emotions running wild. Your kids have hormones bouncing around on the inside like little microbials. I mean, they're just everywhere. So it's important to know that those years are going to be years that are very often the most challenging ones. So what do you do with that? And a lot of the strength of a family rests in what the communication is like inside that family. How well are people able to say what they're really feeling and be heard, and then simultaneously hear someone else say how they're feeling and actually listen to that process. I mean, like, it's really that give and take on both sides, because it's not just what we say to our kids and what they say back to us, but it's also, are we hearing each other? Because we're not always right as adults and they're not always wrong as kids.
So it's not, I hate you, Mom, you're grounded. That's
right.
Not the conversation.
That shouldn't be the whole conversation. Our goal is to be able to get past that.
Gotcha.
You know, how do we answer that? How do we respond to that? How do we prevent the stonewalling that can take place? Because sometimes the easiest thing to do as teenagers is just stop talking.
Oh, right.
You know, my parents don't understand me anyway, so I'm not even going to talk to them. I can have my whole life on social media and skip talking to parents. And quite frankly, to the social media component, because our kids live in that kind of world, it actually reduces in a lot of ways their ability to communicate full and real emotion.
They don't always have real conversations anymore.
Right.
They have text snippets or they have, back and forth. It's a different way.
So we don't actually get to the real conversation because you're practicing almost 24/7 having these very superficial conversations that are less than 45 characters, But now we have to talk about how you're feeling. Now we have to discuss you being hurt or concerned or struggling with something or really being anxious about something. And this is not 45 characters. And this is with Mom. And what happens if Mom was involved? Or this is with Dad. What happens if the person you have to talk to is the same person that made you feel those feelings?
Right.
And in the opposite direction, sometimes our teenagers say things to us that can be very bruising. Sometimes they help us see ourselves in ways that we weren't quite ready to see ourselves. And we respond in rejection in some way, but how that shows up can be really rough. So Strengthening Families is an excellent resource for learning how to effectively communicate as a family. So that's our C. Then we go to our A, anger management. Now, once we start talking, the reality is
it escalates. It can creep right up.
It can. And what happens if it touches on a raw spot? Because we all have triggers. We all have things that when they're said to us, they send us into a particular space. So what happens when that takes place? And in both directions. We as parents are really good at knowing the soft spots where our kids are concerned. And sometimes we will purposely press that button because we want to shut this conversation down, or we want to make sure that you understand that I'm the parent and you're the child. And we go places that sometimes we regret that we have gone. And it's training our kids to back away from us. And the same thing in the opposite direction. Sometimes our kids do certain things.
I was going to say that too.
That push us into places.
They
know
they can
our
spot
sensitive
our
zones.
weak points.
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. Better than most. So, and their instincts are good.
Yeah.
So how they respond, what they say, what they do, what that creates, because there is a measure of accountability. You know, just because you're 14 doesn't mean that you're just graced on everything you say because you're a minor.
Right.
You know, we're still responsible for our communication. Now, it's important that you can be honest, but we're still responsible for how we are honest.
Right.
Absolutely. So learning how to manage anger positively. What do I say? How do I say it? How am I authentic and true, but simultaneously aware that I need to manage the emotions that I'm feeling right now? And making sure that things that are verbal don't turn into things that are physical, that we don't punch with our words, nor do we punch with our fists. We don't slap, we don't curse, there are lots of ways to communicate and respond to anger in ways that build bridges instead of barriers. And in a healthy family, there are always more bridges than there are barriers. Then we get to our responsibilities. In a functioning home, in a healthy family, we all have to own some piece of the whole. We all have to bring something to the table. You may be 5 years old and no, you don't pay the bills and you don't make sure that the internet is taken care of. You might not be responsible for those expenses.
Right.
But what are you responsible for? Cleaning up behind yourself, making sure even perhaps that you let the dog out, like you may be responsible for just making sure that your bath towels in the bathroom when it's time for bath time. There's certain things that you can still do, even when your kids are small, that makes it better when they're older and expected to do more. Responsible for taking out the trash. You may be responsible for babysitting your siblings. Teaching responsibility at a young age is what helps to ensure that it's understood and respected at an older age. But all too often, we forget that it's important that everybody is doing their part.
Well, sometimes it's easier to just do it yourself.
Yes.
And you can't take the easy route. I mean, that's the thing. In the long run, it's not easier. But in that moment, it is sometimes easier.
Right.
Yeah.
Like the dishes need to be done. I'm going to just pack the dishwasher. But you know what? Sometimes you got to let them pack the dishwasher wrong. Or stand up there and get the dishpan hands that we all used to get, washing them by hand. Whatever it is required, getting that trash out on time. Yes, you're sick of telling them to put out the trash, and then they don't put the bag back in the trash can.
Right.
And so you find yourself just saying, oh, it's just more expedient that I just go ahead and do it. But what are we teaching our kids when we do that? That someone will always pick up for the ball that they drop?
Well, and if they do a crummy job, then they get out of it.
Absolutely. So I keep doing less so that eventually mom will give up, or dad's going to just say, forget it, I'll cut the grass myself, or, I'll clean this up myself. But if we're raising accountable individuals, if we're raising children that we want to be positive contributors to our community and ultimately the global community, then we have to be mindful of what we're doing along the way. And if we didn't do it before, it's never too late to start.
That's right.
Never. We can admit as parents that, hey, I missed the mark on something. I forgot to make sure that you had something before I launch you out of this house. So we're going to start doing some things that we weren't doing before. But you set those boundaries, you create that structure, you hold them responsible, and you are consistent about it. So responsibilities, it actually even increases self-esteem and a sense of connection where the family is concerned.
Right.
Because you've had to invest. And then finally, E, evaluation. What you learn in the classes is not so fixed that it has to be applied just this way. you're going to have to figure out how it works for your family.
Right.
Based on
everyone's different.
Absolutely. And personalities are different, and circumstances are different. So what you may hear now has to be tailored to fit into who you are as a family. So that sometimes means that, okay, we tried it this way, it didn't really work because, I have 3 boys at home and they're not quite the same when it comes to 3 girls at home, or the converse, or based on what the ages are. There are a lot of variables that can be involved. So evaluating and knowing that it's appropriate and necessary on a regular basis so that you figure out what works for you, so that it's your own strengthening families recipe in your house, but the principles that are taught can universally be applied. We just have to make it personal for our own houses. So go.
And we may have to try to do it one way, and if that doesn't work, adjust a little bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. Throw the spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. Sometimes we've got to change a few things, and we've got to be okay with that process. And tweaking is totally appropriate. We all have to recalibrate every once in a while. Hey, is this working quite the way that we wanted to? It might have been working for a little while, and then your kid gets used to something and they find a way to skirt it. So now we've got to change a few things where this is concerned, or perhaps even as adults. I used to be home at this time of day to make sure that this was working. But now grandma's going to have to be with the kids. So what do we need to change so that it's working well when my kids are not with me? There are certain kinds of things that can shift because our lives are ever changing. So we have to be okay with evaluating over and over again, examining what's going on, and tweaking so that we continue to maintain those success formulas that work for our families.
Okay, so strengthening our families involves caring, which
Absolutely.
we all do.
Absolutely, which includes our communication, includes our anger management, it includes building responsibilities and teaching responsibilities, and the importance of always having an evaluation process. Always checking to see what is working for you. Do less of what isn't and more of what is. And you'll find a success formula for your family, but we want to help you do it. So come to Healthy Families, give us a call, check us out online. We are here to support you, but that Strengthening Families class is fantastic for it. So we encourage families to get involved, invest in a way that builds your whole family.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Robin.
And thank you for watching. I hope you will use some of the tips you've learned here today to strengthen your family and take it a little farther, take the class at Healthy Families and show how much you care. Thanks for watching.